Hey guys, what's going on? James here, and in this video today, we're going to be talking about which opponent would be the best team for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to play in round number 1 of the 2020 playoffs. Now, we're closing in on week 17 of the regular season, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now as it stands have already clinched a spot in the playoffs, so I'm not going to make any, videos talking about the Atlanta Falcons until the preview video. I'm not going to talk about, matchups to watch, players to watch, keys to victory, none of that, because we just did that 2 weeks ago. I'm not going to do that again, but I instead will talk about some playoff videos, starting with this video right here. So, as I said, right now as it stands, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers right now are the 5th seed. Now, if things stand as they are today, they will either play the Washington football team or the Dallas Cowboys. If the Washington football team wins their Week 17 matchup, they are in. Now, if they lose and the Dallas Cowboys win, the Dallas Cowboys win the NFC East. However, if both teams lose, then the Washington football team will still win the NFC East, thus making the playoffs. So, this is going to be very, very interesting to see who wins the East between the Washington football team and the Dallas Cowboys. However, if there is some crazy scenario where the Buccaneers are not the 5th seed, it is instead the Los Angeles Rams, the Buccaneers would then have to play the Seattle Seahawks in round number 1. So I have written information about all 3 of those teams, taken notes, if you will, for today's video, and I'm going to talk about each team, and then at the end, I'm going to say which team I would want the Buccaneers to play the most, and then which team I would want the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to play the least. So, with that being said, let's get started talking about the first team, that being the Seattle Seahawks, who right now, as it stands, far and above have the best record out of all 3 teams. They're going into Week 17 with an 11-4 record. Their main man, the quarterback Russell Wilson, being one of the biggest reasons why. Over 4,000 passing yards, 38 passing touchdowns, and 13 interceptions, and overall, this offense is pretty decent for the Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson is a great quarterback. Their run game has been decent. They haven't had the benefit of having a consistent running back throughout the entire year due to injuries, but still, Chris Carson, Carlos Hyde, among others, have done a very solid job when they have been healthy and have been able to play in the game. Another big calling card for this offense is the wide receivers. The 2 wide receivers, that being DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. DK Metcalf is having a breakout year. He has been playing absolutely phenomenal this season. He's playing like one of the better wide receivers in the league, and Tyler Lockett is still very good in his own right. Both these guys should finish with over 1,000 yards receiving on the year, and they should not be taken lightly at all, and I could see them, along with Russell Wilson, being a very tough passing attack for the Buccaneers to handle. The running game I wouldn't be as worried about, considering the Buccaneers have one of the better rushing defenses in the entire NFL. The problem that falls in line with the Seattle Seahawks offense has to do with the offensive line, who have given up 45 sacks on the year, which is not good under any circumstances, especially compared to the Buccaneers offensive line, who has given up significantly less sacks throughout the year. This has been a problem that has plagued the Seahawks for many years now, and it has still been a problem throughout this season. With how much the Buccaneers blitz and how effective their pass rush can be, they are up there in terms of overall team sacks for the season. It could give the Seahawks problems if the 2 teams were to square off. Now moving on to the defensive side of the football, the Seahawks definitely are a defense that you cannot overlook. They have playmakers at all 3 levels of the defense. Along the defensive line, they traded for Carlos Dunlap, who has been doing very good, and they also have Jaron Reed at defensive tackle, who is very good in his own right as well. In the linebacker core, you've got Bobby Wagner, who is a Hall of Fame caliber middle linebacker, and then even in that secondary, you have Shaquille Griffin. I don't remember which one it is. I think it's Shaquille Griffin, the cornerback, who is still very good for this secondary, and then you have safety Jamal Adams, who has been an absolute beast, just as a run defender, as a coverage guy, and then especially as a pass rusher. I believe he has 9.5 sacks on the year right now, and I've seen a lot of people criticize this Seattle Seahawks pass rush and whatnot and say it's not good. The first half of the season, that was very much the case. However, the second half of the season, that couldn't be farther from the truth, as right now they have 43 sacks as a defense and 14 interceptions, interceptions, which is only 4 less sacks than the Buccaneers have as a team, and only 1 less interception than the Buccaneers have as a team. So this is a defense, this is a team that you cannot overlook under any circumstances. There is a reason that they are 11-4. The next team that we're going to look at is going to be the Washington football team, who right now, as it stands, are in the lead technically for the NFC East. I believe they have a 6-9 record. Their quarterbacks have amounted 14 touchdowns to 14 interceptions. They've been playing a wide variety of quarterbacks. Alex Smith, Dwayne Haskins, who they just released, Taylor Heinicke, among a couple of other quarterbacks who have had to take snaps due to injuries, benchings, and other things like that. Antonio Gibson has been a very good running back for this Washington football team. Also, J.D. McKissick has been a very good backup for Antonio Gibson. Both these guys make up a pretty decent running back tandem, although I would say they are more effective as receiving options than, say, rushing options. They're still decent as rushing options, especially Antonio Gibson, but I feel like if these two teams squared off against each other, they would be utilized a lot more in the passing game. Aside from that, in terms of offensive weapons, besides those two running backs, you have Terry McLaurin, the wide receiver, who is very good. He has over 1,000 receiving yards, and then you have Logan Thomas, the tight end, former player of Bruce Arians, who has been very good throughout the second half of the season. But after those 4 weapons, guys, that's pretty much it overall for this Washington football team offense. And their offensive line is not much better than the Seattle Seahawks, as they have given up 47 sacks against their quarterbacks throughout the season, which is not good. It is actually just as much, actually a little bit more than what the Seahawks had given up. They traded away Trent Williams, and they can feel the pain because their offensive line has struggled a lot with injuries and just overall poor play, which has led to some injuries involving their quarterbacks. Now, their defense is still very good. They have gone to the quarterback 44 sacks this season, and they've also got 14 interceptions. That's only 3 less sacks than the Buccaneers, and only 1 less interception than the Buccaneers. The defense is the main calling card. Again, much like the Seahawks, they've got players at every single level. Chase Young, Ryan Kerrigan, and other players along that defensive line are very good. They have one of the better defensive lines in the NFL. Their linebacking core is still pretty raw, still pretty, I guess, I'd say middle of the pack even, but they make up for it with a pretty decent secondary led by Kendall Fuller. This is a defense that, in my opinion, is up there with some of the best in the league. However, the offense, minus a couple of weapons, leaves a lot left to be desired. Finally, guys, the last team to take a look at is going to be the Dallas Cowboys, who right now, again, are fighting to win that NFC East. They lost Dak Prescott earlier on in the season. He was replaced by Andy Dalton, who has 14 touchdowns to 7 interceptions right now. He has been an all-right quarterback, more of a game manager than anything. Their run game is still pretty decent, minus some fumbling problems from Ezekiel Elliott, but Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard are still a pretty decent 1-2 punch at that running back position. I still think Ezekiel Elliott is one of the better running backs in the NFL. However, again, he'd be going up against one of the better rushing defenses in the entire NFL if these two teams were to play each other. The main calling card, in my opinion, for this Dallas Cowboys offense has to do with their receiving trio. Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb, one of the better wide receiver trios in the entire NFL, and Dalton Schultz at tight end is no slouch either. This is a passing attack that could get heated up if they are able to build momentum, especially with Andy Dalton, who in my opinion is no slouch at quarterback. Their offensive line is definitely the best out of all 3 teams, only giving up 38 sacks on the season, which I know is still a lot, but compared to the other 2 teams, it feels like an oasis. The main problem with the Cowboys has to do with their very lackluster defense. Right now, they've only gotten to the quarterback 29 sacks and 9 interceptions as a team, which is significantly less in both categories than the Washington football team and the Seattle Seahawks and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, in my opinion, the Dallas Cowboys are definitely a very boom or bust team. If their offense can't get going, things could get very bad very quickly. I feel like they would have to be in a lot of shootout situations, whoever they play in the playoffs, if they were to make it. If it was the Buccaneers versus the Cowboys, I could see a lot of shootout scenarios that would have to be the case for the Cowboys to have a chance at winning, because Tom Brady versus this Cowboys defense, I feel like he would do a pretty darn decent job. But with all that being said, guys, which team do I feel would be the worst matchup for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to face? And, you know, in my opinion, guys, I'm going to go ahead and say probably the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, they are probably the most complete team out of all three of these teams. They have the quarterback. They have some decent running backs, which again, it is a favorable matchup for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, but they've got two very solid wide receivers, and they have a defense that has been clicking on a lot of cylinders throughout the second half of the season. So I feel that if the Buccaneers had to play the Seattle Seahawks, this would be a very tough game for them to win. Russell Wilson always can create magic in the playoffs, and the Buccaneers would have a very tough game ahead. The second hardest team I feel it would be for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers to face, and this is definitely a toss-up, and you could really go with one or the other, but I'm going to say the Washington football team would be the second hardest team for the Buccaneers to face. Now, it is definitely a very slight margin between the Washington football team and the Dallas Cowboys as to which team would be the more favorable matchup, but I picked Washington here as the second hardest team because of the fact that Alex Smith, if he is able to get going and when he is fully healthy, he can still be a very decent quarterback. And I feel like the problems with the Washington football team's defense would be more significant. They have a better defensive line that could get after Tom Brady. They have better cornerbacks who can cover the Buccaneers wide receivers better. And I could see this game definitely turning into a defensive versus defensive type showdown where maybe both offenses aren't able to do a whole ton and it could be a very low scoring game. I would still give the edge to the Buccaneers simply because of the fact that the Washington football team doesn't have a lot of firepower on offense, but their defense still makes up for this in a pretty decent chunk of a way. So Washington is a team that you can't really ignore. Alex Smith, he's been to the playoffs before. Sure, their running game is not the best. Sure, they might not have a crap ton of weapons, but that defense is really no joke. And finally, guys, the team that I feel would be the best matchup for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would be the Dallas Cowboys. Now, this offense is still very good for Dallas. I like Andy Dalton at quarterback. I think their running game is still pretty good, and I really like their receiving weapons. I think they have the second best receiving weapons out of all three teams. However, that defense is a problem. I don't think that defense could hang with the Buccaneers offense. I think that if they're not able to get after Tom Brady, if they're not able to cover the wide receivers that the Buccaneers have, Dallas simply would not be able to keep up. And a big component of this Dallas Cowboys offense is their running game. Going up against one of the best rushing defenses in the NFL could stall that offense pretty quickly if they're not careful. If they're able to get after Andy Dalton, rattle him, then those wide receivers become a lot less effective. So, in my opinion, it would be very solid works of matchups, both on offense and on defense, versus the Cowboys for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think that they would be the most favorable matchup for this upcoming round one playoff game, followed by the Washington football team, and then the hardest matchup being versus the Seattle Seahawks. But guys, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know your thoughts about all of this down in the comment section below. Which out of these three teams do you feel would be the hardest matchup, and which team do you feel would be the easiest matchup? Give me your thoughts down in the comment section below. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Hope you all enjoyed. Now, we'll see you in the next video or the next live stream. But until then, and as always, guys, goodbye for now, and go Bucs.